Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about a landmark court case ruling that's been given in San Francisco that has the potential to blow open the duopoly that's currently in place between Google and Apple with regards to both of their app stores. Now, this court case was brought against Google by Epic Games, who are the founders and creators of FORTNITE, which was a game that went viral in 2018 and became a phenomenon all across the world during the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you've never seen FORTNITE, then obviously you've been living under a rock for the last few years. But essentially, it's a first-person shooter game where you compete and try to kill 99 other players online to become the game champion. Now, one of the reasons that Tim Sweeney, the founder and chief executive of Epic Games, brought a court case against Google and also Apple in the first place was that they wanted to take a continuing slice of all of his revenue. Now, if you think back to the way computer games used to operate before everything went online, you firstly had to buy a games console, then buy a cartridge, plug it in, and then you could sit happily at home playing on your game in your own in the dark for as long as you wanted. However, when everything went online, the world changed, and Epic Games saw this as a huge opportunity to change their business model. And with its FORTNITE game, Epic Games moved to a concept known as games as a service. So basically, this was a complete change to the model, whereby you give away the game for free, so there's no upfront purchase price. However, if you want to do really well in that game, you're encouraged to buy things through what's known as in-app purchases. And this basically means that whilst you're playing the game, you can buy better guns and weapons and skins to improve your chances of being that number one player. And as FORTNITE took off and went global, so did FORTNITE's revenues. They were earning billions of dollars online as more and more people wanted to be that number one player. But the big complaint that Epic Games had is that every time they made a sale to one of their players, Apple or Google took a slice of that action. And we are talking a serious slice. Up to 30% of every single dollar that was spent by players was going to one of those two platforms. Now, Tim Sweeney of Epic Games is a businessman, and he understood that Apple and Google needed to take some sort of payment. However, he put forward a plan whereby they would take 8% of the initial upfront fee to cover the costs of all of their business, but not to keep taking a slice of future revenue. Apple and Google decided that they didn't like this proposal and turned it down. So in order to avoid having to pay this ongoing commission to Apple and Google, Epic Games came up with a new concept. And in August 2020, they announced that all players would receive a 20% discount on all future purchases, providing that they downloaded FORTNITE from the internet rather than the Google and Apple app stores. And the reason that they'd done this was because Google and Apple operate a system whereby all of the developers that upload games and other things onto their app have to use the payment system that's set up by Google and Apple. And because they're using that payment system, all of the money that they're receiving in in-app purchases goes through the Google and Apple books, and therefore enables both of those companies to take a 30% slice off the top. Now, the reason that Epic Games wanted people to download the app directly, not from the Apple or Google Play Store, was that it enabled them to have their own payment system in place. So when players made a future in-app purchase, that money was going directly to Epic Games and wasn't touching the Apple or Google bank accounts. Now, clearly word about this new system got out very, very quickly, and both Google and Apple immediately delisted the FORTNITE game from their app stores. So if you wanted to play FORTNITE, you had to download it directly from the web. And this was obviously a really interesting decision because at that time, FORTNITE was by far the biggest game in the world. So obviously this was a huge game of brinkmanship at the time. Neither Google nor Apple wanted to allow Epic Games to set up this separate payment structure, but essentially they were cutting off their noses to spite their face because they were losing a huge amount of revenue. But what was at stake here wasn't just the revenue from Epic Games, it was the revenue from all of the developers. Because if Google and Apple were seen to let Epic Games get away with this, then it opened the door for other developers to do exactly the same. So what we had here was a situation where those two monumental companies were basically protecting their own position, and that's called a duopoly, which is basically a monopoly shared by two different parties. Now, fortunately for Epic Games, and maybe one of the reasons why they took such aggressive action, was that Fortnite wasn't actually entirely dependent on mobile gaming. A lot of its gamers were either using consoles or just playing online on their PCs. But in response to being delisted, Epic Games brought court cases against both Apple and Google, saying that they were operating anti-monopolistic practices. Now, the court case against Apple was decided in 2021, and interestingly, Epic Games lost 9 out of the 10 charges that they brought against Apple. However, the judge did rule in their favour in terms of being able to set up a separate payment system. So this has established a concept whereby developers can now actually set up a third-party payment system, so all of the cash doesn't have to go through Apple. However, the case against Google has taken much longer to come to court, and the ruling has now been announced, and a jury in San Francisco found in favour of Epic Games and against Google, and this now has the potential to blow open the whole of the app industry, because Google and Apple may now have to change the way they operate. They can no longer force developers to use their payment systems, and there is a possibility in the future that it will be easier to either get your apps from another app store or to just download things directly from the internet. Now, in terms of what this means for Apple and Google, this chart shows the quarterly Apple App Store app and game revenue dating back to 2016. And this shows that in 2022, total revenue was around $87 billion. And when you take into account the fact that Apple is taking a slice of around 30% of that, that equates to around $26 billion of revenue. And this chart shows the annual Google Play revenue dating back to 2016 and shows that total revenue is forecast in 2023 to be around $46 billion. So Google's share of that, assuming a 30% cut, is around $14 billion. So the commission that Apple and Google are taking from developers is absolutely enormous. And of course, if you're a developer, it does stick in the throat that these guys are taking such a big slice of the action, not just up front, which I think most people would be fine with. There is a cost to launching your business, to setting things up and getting established. But the ongoing commission that both of these are taking from every single dollar of revenue is causing problems and is taking money out of the industry. And this latest case about antitrust against Google does have the potential to blow the industry wide open and change the operating practices to force both Google and Apple to open up their app stores and introduce more competition, which will have obviously a negative impact on their earnings, but clearly has the potential for smaller companies to be able to earn more profit and share things around on more of an equitable basis. So the overall summary of today's video is that the outcome of this court case does have the potential to change the way the market operates. At the moment, Apple and Google have a very comfortable position. If you've got a mobile phone, it's likely to be either an iPhone or an Android phone, and therefore you tend to have to use these app stores to get all of the apps to load up onto that phone and do things. Now, there is a possibility that going forward, there will be more competition opened up, and it will be really interesting to see how quickly things change and whether or not it does improve the landscape for all of the rest of us, whether it brings down prices, or if the industry just decides that it's a convenient way of moving profit away from Apple and Google towards all of the developers, and that all of us consumers continue to have to pay exactly the same. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. As you may well have spotted, it's been slightly different to my usual format. I haven't included chapters, I haven't included a lot of graphs and data. I wanted to just talk to you about this issue. Please let me know what you think of this format, whether you prefer it or whether you prefer it to be a bit more structured. But hopefully you've enjoyed it and found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you did, then please give me a thumbs up, and here's something to put a smile on your face.